Welcome back, everybody, to your digital marketing and SEO course. I just want to quickly talk about who this module would suit. Of course, it will suit anyone who is wanting to learn more about SEO, but specifically, I just wanted to highlight small business owners, website managers and developers, influencers and affiliates, and then people hiring external SEO. Even if you're not going to be managing something like this yourself, it's always a good idea to have at least a basic knowledge so that you understand what everyone is talking about, when you're in those kinds of situations. So the objectives of today's lesson, we're going to be looking at how search engines work particularly. Then you'll get an introduction to something called the Google Search Console, which is a core SEO tool. We'll be looking at creating and implementing sitemaps, and then you will understand the basics of robot.txt files. Right, so SEO, search engine optimization, is the process of implementing techniques to increase a website page's position on the SERPs. Now, we have mentioned this in the first module, but SERPs is the search engine results page. You'll be hearing that quite a lot in this module. And something that comes up a lot is, why does everyone talk about Google when there are many other search engines? Yes, that is very true. There are many other search engines, but the fact is that Google has almost 92% market share, and that is followed by Bing at 2.55% market share. So essentially, Google is number one and Bing is number two, but at 2.55%. It's mad. So that is why many people choose to focus purely on Google. Of course, if you don't want to do that, if you want to cater for all search engines, that's not a problem. The rules are essentially the same, but of course the algorithms and all the features would differ. In this module, we do only focus on Google. It's important that you get to understand a few terms in SEO. First up, we have algorithm, and I'm sure you've heard this many times. It's actually quite a big topic at the moment. It is a process or a set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations. So essentially, all platforms have their own algorithm. Facebook has an algorithm, for example, to determine which posts appear on our newsfeed. Google, likewise, has or uses an algorithm or several algorithms to determine which results to show on the results page and in which order. And that is where PageRank comes in. So this is the specific name of the algorithm used by Google Search, and this is what ranks web pages in their search engine results. So their algorithm is called PageRank. It might seem like a silly question, but what do search engines actually do? What is their function? They have three main functions, and that is to crawl, to index, and to rank. So crawl is referring to scouring the internet for content and looking over that code or that content for each URL that they find. So every single web page on the internet is crawled by Google. You could also say that crawling is looking at. So Google is just looking at all the pages on the internet. Then we have indexing, and that is storing and organizing the content that was found or seen during the crawling process. So once a page is in the index, then it could be displayed as a result on a search engine results page. If it's crawled, that doesn't mean that it qualifies to show. It has to be indexed as well. And then rank is what we mentioned earlier. This is where search engines decide which pieces of content will appear on the page and in what position. Essentially, the positions on a search engine results page moves from most relevant to the person's search query to least relevant, or at least Google's understanding, what results and context they have drawn from that search term. When it comes to indexing, we are going to be spending more time on it, but I just thought you might be interested to know, especially if you have your own website, although you can do this with any website. If you go into your browser and type site, your domain, so the name of your website, .com or whatever it is, then if you press enter, you can actually see which pages of the website have been indexed. It will give you a list. So that might be quite cool for you guys to have a look. But the first step is crawling. And Neil Patel, who is a fantastic SEO and general marketing guy, he said that a site's crawlability is the important first step to ensuring its searchability. So as much as indexing is what determines if a page is eligible to show on the results page, it's the crawlability, because that is the first step. What it's viewing is of course tied to what it's storing, what it's indexing. And we touched on this in module 1, but the way that these search engines perform these functions is through bots and spiders. So it's not literally those things, it's just little bits of code or programs that have been created to perform these functions. The name to Google's bot or spider is called Googlebot. And that is, as I mentioned, the piece of software that is responsible for crawling the website. It's important to understand this in a bit more detail, but first up, let's start with something called crawl budget. Now, each site has their own individual crawl budget, and essentially what that means, it's the number of pages or URLs that a bot wants to crawl. And wants to crawl is determined by the authority and the health and essentially having a good website. The higher the page rank that you have, the more time that a bot will spend on a site. So they all work together, but it starts with the bot crawling and indexing a page. So crawl budget is important. There are some ways that SEOs try to boost the likelihood of a site being crawled more often and a higher crawl budget. But because Google isn't very good at sharing information about these kinds of things, we don't actually know 100% how effective they are. We will be discussing some of them later on in the module. Next up, we have robot.txt files, which again we will be covering a bit later. These files tell the bot if any pages should not be crawled, and there are specific reasons for this. Generally, you wouldn't want to exclude any pages from your website, but there are cases where this makes sense, and a robot.txt file is where someone would do that. Then we have non-stop crawling. So essentially what that means is a Google bot is constantly crawling the internet. It does not stop. Someone from Google actually said that the Google bot shouldn't access your site more than once every few seconds on average. So it's doing a lot, but it's important to know that it's not crawling all the pages at the same time. It's choosing those specific URLs. So if you're wanting others to be crawled, then it's about optimizing those pages. And well, yes, that's what we're talking about. That's what this module is referring to. But yes, so they don't stop crawling ever. It's always happening. All sites are always being crawled, indexed, updated, you name it. Then to try and stop the bots from crawling pages that we don't actually or necessarily want them to, we have something called a sitemap. And this tells the bot, it's again another file, what should be crawled and indexed. It does work together with the robots.txt file, but it is important to note that just because someone has a sitemap, it doesn't mean that the bot will ignore other pages or pages that aren't on it. It's just a kind of helpful indicator for the bot. Then just to set some expectations here, unfortunately, it's bad news-ish. Don't expect the first page when it comes to ranking. You won't rank on the first page for your top keywords. Ranking for anything could take a year or more. And after implementing the basics, ranking highly on search engines needs the bulk of attention on research, on content, and long tail keywords. And what I mean by research is that also includes any kind of updates that are happening within SEO. There are many, many updates, so you do need to stay on top of that. And then content, because content is arguably the most important aspect when it comes to SEO. And then when I say long tail keywords, just a reminder, those are longer search terms or phrases. So it is important to keep these things in mind. We will be looking at ways, of course, to rank for the keywords that we want to be ranking for, but just so that you do know, you're not going to rank for all of them, and it will take time. It's also not stable. So let's say you do get to the top position. That doesn't mean you're going to stay there. You can adjust or change positions really, really quickly. So one of the fundamental tools in SEO is called the Google Search Console. I did mention it in module 1, and it is completely free. What's important to know is that it is a search analytics report to see the organic queries, so not the paid, your ads that you've been serving, your organic queries and metrics. And then you can also manage your technical SEO, so the kind of back end stuff, which you might not have knowledge in and someone else might be managing for you. But again, as I mentioned, it's so good to just have an overview and understanding of what you need to do or what you need to tell someone else to do. I think it is also good to know if someone's telling you that something is impossible or not, you can actually, know whether that is correct. Unfortunately, when it comes to SEO, there are so many people out there who aren't actually qualified or skilled enough to be promising people the things that they do. Traffic. And you can manage the technical SEO. And that means things like you're managing your crawling and your indexing, viewing and fixing technical errors, and more. I will be taking you through this, an overview of it for this lesson, but we're not going to be spending too much time in it today just because there is so much information. But this is what it looks like. If you go in your browser and you search for Google Search Console, you would see this, or it might be different, but there is a blue Start Now button. I am going to show you exactly what it looks like right now. This is Google Search Console, and we are on the overview section. As I mentioned, we're not going to be going through all of this today. We will cover it in the remainder of the module, but just not today's lesson. On the left here, though, you can see these are all the tools that are available to you. URL inspection is where you can look at individual URLs and see errors and all sorts of things. That's also where you can submit or ask for something to be indexed. So we will be spending time here. Then the search results, this is referring to all the organic queries of a website. This allows you to see other metrics. Then we have the index section. We have the coverage, so the coverage of the website, the percentage of the website that has been indexed, and other information. Sitemaps, which we will be looking at a bit later. And then removals of indexing or robots.txt files, anything to do with that. Then we have speed, mobile usability, AMP, which is Google's accelerated mobile pages, logos, and review snippets, and then a few things on the left here. But yes, so this is an overview of Google Search Console, a completely free tool that is really just required for anyone who's wanting to take SEO seriously. Of course, you can't actually get access to that data without verifying your Google Search Console. So I'm not going to take you through creating the actual account because that's very easy. You just click that blue button that I showed you and add your details. It's the verification, so making sure essentially Google just wants to know that you are actually linked to that website that you put in when you created the account. It really just prevents other random people from being able to claim your site, and then of course adds the necessary tracking or code that they need to gather that information. There are multiple ways to verify Google Search Console, and part of it also depends on if you have a CMS like WordPress, or if you're using a custom CMS or a developer has built a website for you. So let's have a look. This is the step before in the Google Search Console, before you get the instructions for adding the verification. This domain on the left here is really for big businesses or big websites that have multiple subdomains, and perhaps they have a secure site and a non-secure site, etc. The only verification option here is the DNS verification, so it has to be uploaded in the DNS record. So generally people wouldn't continue with this. You would go on with the URL prefix, which is essentially the same, your root directory, your main name. So I'm just going to make something up. It's going to be my name, and there we go. Continue. This won't work out. We don't have a site like that. And of course, we haven't even done this before. So at the top here, you have an HTML file as an option for verification. You would download this file, and this would be uploaded to the root directory. Once it is uploaded, it shouldn't be removed even after the verification. It says that here actually. And then once you have uploaded this file, you would come back here and then you would verify. There are also other ways to verify this. You can use an HTML tag, which is again a bit of code in the back end. Then Google Analytics, which is actually incredibly convenient. If you have already set up Analytics, or a business has, and they have included the code, the Google Analytics code on each page of their site, then all they'll need to do is just log in and link this up here. So that is super easy. There's also Google Tag Manager, which is basically like Analytics. Instead of a global tag that's used in Analytics, this is the Google Tag Manager. And then if you are associated with a domain name provider that they've got, so we had seen there is GoDaddy, internet.bs, name.com, then there are separate instructions. So yes, this is how you would do it in Google Search Console. Now, this is WordPress, and do forgive me, it looks a bit crazy at the moment, so I'm sorry if it's overwhelming. There are lots of plugins and updates and things going on here, but I just wanted to show you on the left, there are different plugins, right? They add extra features to your WordPress site, basically. And there is something called Yoast, which is on this website. There are many SEO plugins, and I can't recommend a specific one. I think a number of them have their pros and cons. Yoast does start out with a free package, but then their premium options do give you more options. But here would be where you could verify your Google Search Console as well. So I'm just going to show you that. I've just looked at the general settings. You can see at the top here, it says Yoast WordPress SEO general settings. If you scroll down, then we see here Webmaster Tools. We've got various, but Google Webmaster Tools would be the one to focus on for the Search Console. Now, what you would need to do, and unfortunately I can't do this as we don't have a Google Search Console account for this WordPress account, but you would just be able to copy paste a link in here, and that would link up your WordPress to your Google Search Console. There are other CMSs, content management systems like WordPress. They would of course look different, but they'll have a similar tool. And we're going to be back here just now to look at the XML site maps section. And in lesson 2, we're going to be looking at titles and metas, and that is it for now. Jumping back to the crawl budget, because we're going to go into crawling a bit more, it is important to save the crawl budget that you have for important pages and do what you can, to ensure that that happens. Now, just a reminder of what crawl means. It is scouring the internet for content and looking over the code and the content for each URL that a bot finds. If you are wanting the crawlers to look at your site more intelligently, then you would implement something called a sitemap. I did mention it earlier, but a sitemap is a file that has information about the pages, the videos, and any other files that are on a website, and the relationships between them. It is literally a list of the URLs that you want the bots to crawl. The order of it doesn't matter, you can just put them all in there, but essentially you are signaling or telling Google that you would like them to crawl these URLs over and above any others on your website. And it would look a little something like this. As you can see, it is literally a list of all the URLs that this website would like to be crawled and therefore indexed. So of course you would want to make sure that you include the important pages on the website, the ones that are updated with content regularly, the ones you want to focus on. You should also exclude any duplicate content. You don't necessarily get penalized for having duplicate content on your site, but it is a good idea to choose a preferred URL and focus it on there. And then I guess it goes without saying that you should exclude any pages that have thin content. Especially, you don't need to include your thank you pages or your login pages, anything that's not really important for the user, as well as in terms of content. There are a few ways to create a sitemap, and this is one of them. There are a few websites like this, but this one in particular is xml-sitemaps.com. This is a free option and is perfect for anyone who is just starting out. A small website is considered anything up to 500 pages, so that's quite a lot to start off with. You can use the free tool on the left. It's just called the Online Generator. And all you would need to do is at the top, as it says, enter the website URL to create a sitemap. It is as easy as that. You would see something like this. Basically, it's just telling you it's completed. You could then view the sitemap details, and then you would download your XML sitemap file. So XML is just the format that it's in. This is the file that would be uploaded to the root folder of the website, and I'll show you or tell you what a root directory is just now. You can edit this sitemap. It's not set in stone. If you feel that there needs to be additional URLs that haven't been included for whatever reason, then you can go and add those. You can take away URLs and etc. You would just edit that quite easily and save it as the same file. You could also do this manually. It's very simple to set up. You would create a .txt file in a notepad or something similar with each URL listed on its own line. So for example, here we have the home page, then we have about, pricing, product catalog, and so on. No matter which way you decide to create a sitemap, they do need to be uploaded into the root directory. And this is essentially another way of saying the domain name, the root directory, but it's relating to the code and the backend of your website. If your domain is academy.com, then your root directory is the same. This is quite technical, as in you do need access to the server and the files that the website is sitting on. If there is a CMS, then there would be an easier way to do this, but it does depend, and there are so many options. So to be honest, if you're not comfortable with it, the best way would be to get a developer involved. I am now back on the Google Search Console, and assuming that someone has generated or created a website and uploaded it to their root directory. So this is, as I'm sure you've come to know now, where a lot of these important things live: robots.txt, sitemaps, verification, etc. So now we're going to just quickly look at sitemaps. This is where you would copy paste the URL that you would have received from uploading it to the root directory. It would look something like this. So the / preceding that is the domain name. So let's say it's laurahall.com/sitemap/policy.xml. Now this is referring to a certain category on the website, and there are various reasons for doing that, but the normal main sitemap would just be something like this here. So /sitemap.xml. That is what you would be receiving. But there are many people who don't want to have to worry about understanding root directories and uploading files. So in that case, and for many other reasons, actually, I'd recommend a managed CMS in the beginning for any website. Even for big businesses, they do use them. So something like WordPress with an SEO plugin. So specifically with something like this, you wouldn't even have to go through this process at all, and I'll show you now. So let's go back to WordPress and the SEO section. If we move from the dashboard to XML sitemaps, you can see here that there is functionality whether to enable the sitemap or not, and that is of course ticked. And then the sitemap is right here. The URL is within this. You could copy this URL and then you could go back and you could paste it into here. And that would be something that you would submit. Although in this case, I would take that out and make it like that. Our final topic for this lesson is indexing and using robots.txt files. This does require technical knowledge to implement, as do many other things ideally actually within SEO, but the robots.txt file specifically. And just to remind you, indexing is storing and organizing the content that was found during the crawling process. So the crawling sees it and the index organizes and stores it. The robots.txt file, which stands for Robots Exclusion Protocol or Standard, is a small text file that is part of all websites, and along with sitemaps, it tells search engines what to index and also what not to index in the robots.txt case. So a robots.txt file has different commands, but just to show you quickly, this is what a very standard basic text file looks like. The user agent with the star or asterisk is basically saying that all kinds of bots are allowed to access this file, and then disallow, which is referring to not crawling a page. Normally that would have a URL in it, but because it's just got that /, it's not disallowing anything. This robots.txt file is essentially open. Every single page is open to be indexed. From here, you would add additional commands, particularly as a site becomes more and more complex. But just the top commands, or the ones we're going to be touching on in this lesson, is disallow, and this tells Google not to crawl a page. No index tells Google not to index a page, so the two are different. And then no follow tells Google not to crawl the links on a page. For example, if you're linking to another website in an article that you have on your website. Let's go through the core uses for the robots.txt files. It is a very good way to optimize your crawl budget, to make sure that, or to try as hard as possible for bots not to index pages that shouldn't be indexed, that you're not focusing on ranking for when it comes to SEO. So some examples, we have non-public pages, and that is really what it says. So no pages that you need to display openly to the public. If you have an admin or login section on your website, then that's not something you would want your crawl budget to be focused on. So you can exclude those kinds of things. Then another one is thank you pages. These are also not really public pages or pages that you want people to be viewing, especially because they are mainly seen after someone has submitted details or made a sale or something like that. You don't want people to be able to see those pages without going through that whole process. So that is something to exclude. And then if you have the same content, I did touch on this earlier, if you have duplicate content for any reason, you're doing a test, there's an old page that you've forgotten about, or you just duplicated it and changed the page title, make sure that you're excluding those duplicate pages because it can actually penalize you in terms of your ranking. And you can actually find your robots.txt file very easily. If you have a website or an existing website, any website, you can check. You can type your website name.com/robots.txt into your browser, and you should be able to see which files or what the string of code in that .txt file looks like. If you don't see a file, or if you get a 404 page error, then you actually need to add one to the website. It means you don't have one. I'm just referring to any of you who do have your own website, but yes, then something would need to be created. And you should also scold whoever created your website. Congratulations, we are now done with lesson 1, and I will see you for lesson 2 very soon.